It happened over 30 years ago, around the late 80s. At that time, I was working on farmland in the countryside. My income wasn't much compared to my peers, who had moved to big cities in search of better paying jobs, so I decided to leave my rural hometown and head to the city to look for work. When I first arrived, I quickly discovered that there wasn't much work available, especially with no degrees. Most of the jobs I could find were temporary construction gigs. Once a project was finished, I was forced to move to the next site, making my employment situation quite unstable. Then one day, I happened to walk past a building and noticed a woman standing outside, visibly upset and angrily complaining to what looked to be her husband. From what I overheard, it seemed like nobody could last more than a few days working as a guard in their building. Everyone who took the job quit almost immediately, and she didn't understand why. This odd situation piqued my curiosity, so I looked toward the building and noticed a sign that said they were hiring a watchman. Without thinking much, I walked over to them and asked if they were still hiring. The man confirmed they were and asked if I was interested. He explained that the previous guard had abruptly left without saying why. Intrigued, I asked about the pay, and he offered a generous amount compared to other jobs I'd had at the time. But that wasn't all. If I managed to stay for a full week, he would double my pay. With an offer like that, how could anyone say no? Without hesitation, I accepted. Before finalizing the deal, the owner kept asking if I was sure I wanted the job, almost as if he was trying to dissuade me. But I was confident, thinking, it's just guarding a building, how hard can it be? After everything was settled, the owner opened the heavy, rolling steel gate and took me inside. Upon entering, I was immediately struck by the sight of the ground floor, cluttered with car parts stacked haphazardly all over the place. Looking up, I noticed a mezzanine level where even more auto parts were stored. The owner then pointed out the bathroom built under the staircase, saying that if I needed to use it, this was the one to use. He then led me up to the mezzanine and showed me a small room that had been set up there. Inside, there was a mat, a pillow, a shelf, and a fan, clearly arranged for someone to sleep in while guarding the place during the day. After that, the owner took me upstairs to the second floor and showed me a bedroom. However, I noticed something odd. The door to this room was taped shut with a large X pattern in the middle, and a pair of women's shoes was neatly placed in front. The owner firmly warned me not to enter the room or touch the shoes. They were to stay exactly as they were. I wondered why there would be a pair of shoes when no one lived there, but I didn't think much of it and agreed, saying, "Okay, I understand." After that, we went back downstairs where the owner handed me the keys and told me he'd be back the next day with some workers. He instructed me to be ready to open the gate for them and also asked me to clean the place up while I was there. I agreed, and the owner left. On my first night as a guard, nothing unusual happened. The second night passed just as uneventfully. But on the third night, after closing up the building and finishing my tasks, I went downstairs to take a shower in the bathroom under the stairs. While showering, I suddenly heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Since the bathroom was directly beneath the staircase, I could clearly hear each step getting closer. Curious, I looked up and noticed dust falling from the steps as if someone was indeed walking on them. I stood still, listening as the footsteps came down the stairs and stopped right in front of the bathroom door. But when I glanced in the mirror to see if anybody outside, I was shocked to see a pair of eyes staring at me through the bathroom's ventilation hole. Thinking it was a thief, I grabbed a mop and rushed out the door, but to my surprise, nobody was there. Perplexed, I looked around but found no one. Feeling unsettled, I hurriedly finished up and went back to my room on the mezzanine, trying to sleep. Later that night, I was startled awake by footsteps, this time distinctly the sound of shoes coming down the stairs. The eerie sound stopped right outside my room, followed by loud banging on the wooden walls. I lay frozen in bed, too scared to move, as the banging continued. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and yelled, "Who's there?" The banging stopped immediately, but soon after it started again, even louder than before. Terrified and unsure what to do, I finally bolted out of bed, flung open the door, and rushed out, only to catch a glimpse of someone's back disappearing up the stairs. Overwhelmed with fear, I quickly retreated to my room, where I stayed under the covers for the rest of the night. The next morning, after stepping out to buy some food, a nearby vendor approached me, curious about who I was and what I was doing in the area. I explained that I had recently moved from the countryside and was working as a guard in the building. The vendor seemed surprised and asked if I had encountered anything strange during my time there. I mentioned only hearing odd noises at night. The vendor then issued a warning, claiming that the building was dangerous and notorious for unsettling events. Later that day, an owner returned to pick up some items and asked me how things were going. Still uneasy, but I told him that everything was fine. That evening, by chance, I ran into a friend on the street, and we decided to hang out and drink at the building. My friend ended up getting so drunk that he couldn't go home, so I kindly suggested he stay the night. We both went up to the mezzanine to sleep, but before that, my friend went downstairs to use the bathroom. A few minutes later, he rushed back upstairs, looking visibly shaken and panicked. I asked him what was wrong, and trembling, he stammered,
"Hey, is there an old woman living here?"
Confused, I replied, "No, I live here alone." He insisted.
"I just saw an old woman sitting in the bathroom when I went down there."
Thinking my friend was simply drunk and seeing things, I reassured him that no one else was in the building. However, to ease his mind, we both went down to the bathroom, only to find it empty. My friend, still visibly shaken, hurriedly packed his things and left the building, saying he couldn't stay there any longer. That night, after my friend left, I tried to sleep again, but the eerie noises returned. I could hear footsteps making their way down the stairs, stopping right outside my door, followed by the all-too-familiar loud banging on the walls. Determined to find out what was going on, I crouched down and peered under the door. What I saw made my hair stand on end. The very same pair of women's shoes I had seen upstairs was now in front of my door, but they were being worn by a pair of pale, ghostly feet. Just as I was about to react, an old woman's face appeared, looking directly through the gap under the door. Paralyzed with fear, I jumped back onto my bed, clutching the blankets. The banging on the walls grew louder, and now the door handle was shaking violently, accompanied by the voice of an elderly woman shouting,
"What are you doing here? This is my house!"
I was so terrified that I spent the entire night under the covers, praying until finally the noises subsided around dawn. The next morning, the owner knocked on the door, asking if everything was okay. After taking some time to collect myself, I told him everything that had happened. He sighed and finally admitted that the building was haunted by the ghost of an old housekeeper who had been murdered by a thief many years ago. Ever since then, no one had been able to stay in the building for long without encountering this ghostly woman. After hearing this unsettling revelation, I decided to quit the job and never returned to the building.